Hello, bakers and bureaucrats. My name is TB Skyn, and the Pantheon rework has finally been revealed to the world. Now, there's a whole lot to talk about with this guy, and a lot of that comes from the fact that, like the Akali rework before him, this Pantheon update is not so much a reboot of the character as it is a progression of the character. Old Pantheon, in a manner of speaking, to a certain extent, is still considered canon to the League of Legends universe. He has simply undergone some life changes and has now become, well, the Pantheon that you see before you. That leaves us with a hell of a lot of interesting thematic meat to dive into in terms of his story, in terms of his narrative, in terms of what he communicates about Targon, its relationship with gods and godhoods and divinity in League of Legends in general. And all kinds of good stuff about, representations of immortality, power, divinity, and so on and so forth. That's all gonna have to wait, though, because, well, we're not gonna be doing a What's the Deal with Pantheon video today. That has to wait until he hits the live servers, because that's usually around the time when Teemo.gg put their character model and all his animations up on their online animation viewer, so we can really dive deep into those lovely Pantheon animations, because there's a bunch of good stuff going on with him. So what we're going to be doing today instead is we're going to be taking a look at new Pantheon right here, courtesy of Skin Spotlights, who you should be subscribed to on YouTube already. And we're going to be comparing him to... well, we're going to be comparing him to old Pantheon. We're going to talk a little bit about what's changed, what's remained the same, and what kinds of character design decisions were made when it came to updating old Captain Pizza Feet over here into something a little bit more modern and good-looking. So I've talked before about my lack of enthusiasm for old Pantheon, in the sense that, like, I've called him one of the worst character designs in League of Legends before, but that's sort of not quite accurate to how I really feel. It's not that he's explicitly a bad character design, it's that he has no character. He's a character design absent any individualistic character of his own, because Pantheon, in his old form anyway, is just one big 300 reference. Like, that's really the only way I can specifically read his design, from the aesthetics of sort of this muscled, oiled Spartan warrior with the anachronistic helmet and the weird round shield and the thing going on, to his voice lines where he literally has references to, what is my profession? Well, I always wanted to be a baker, or being kicked down a well is the least of your problems. All of that stuff. Like, everything about him, from his splash art to his character design to his voice lines. Like, look at this splash art. These are just, like, this is 300 that's happening here in the background. Like, they've got these Hellenistic-looking ancient Greek-ish pillars with Pegasus on top up there, and some vaguely Persian-looking soldiers that are being mown down by these muscled Spartan super soldiers back there. And then just Pantheon, who's like, he looks like he looks like if you were playing Age of Empires and you built a spear unit, it might look like this. What he doesn't look like is anything divine, anything that's special, anything that's particularly connected to a unique culture, because everything about his splash art says ancient Greece, sort of vaguely fantasy-like maybe, but nothing connects him to the League of Legends universe. Nothing connects him specifically to places like Targon or Mount Gargantua, which is what Targon used to be called in the very earliest days of the League of Legends lore. Nothing connects him to Lunari, Solari, any of those particular aesthetics, and nothing connects him to anything that isn't just, like, a parody of Earth's ancient history. And League of Legends used to be more like that, obviously. Like, that used to be more normal for what League of Legends was, and it used to be in the same way that Nasus is literally just Anubis, the Egyptian god, and Renekton is literally just Sobek. I think it's Sobek, who's the crocodile-headed god. And you have characters like Kayle, who's literally just an angel. League of Legends used to be comprised of this massive stable of just references to other things, references to pop culture, to mythology, to all kinds of, relatively earthly concepts that were tied together through the conceit that they were all being summoned by the summoners from different dimensions and yada yada yada. That doesn't work in the modern state of League of Legends because, the summoners are gone. Well, they're not gone, they're technically still canon, but the Institute of War, the League of Legends as this grand political game, is gone, and so the thin narrative justification for why the hell Pantheon looks like he walked out of the set of 300 is lost. Like, there's really no reason for him to look this way anymore. And it just becomes, and I hate why does Firefox do this to me sometimes? And he just becomes a thing without any character of his own. Like, once the references don't make sense any longer, there's nothing left. He draws all of his imagery, all of his iconography, all of his personality, all of his everything, all of his character design is based on references. And once references aren't sufficient justification for League of Legends character design anymore, old Pantheon kind of falls apart and has no identity whatsoever. So the thing that surprised me the most, I think, about the new Pantheon rework is how relatively little they really changed about him. He's still, spear, shield, helmet, cloak, loincloth, and, like, they've taken away the breastplate, but that's, like, in terms of, like, massive character design decisions that have been changed, there really isn't that much different about new Pantheon to the old one. He's sort of basically just become higher resolution in a lot of ways. And that to me was really interesting because, like, from my perspective, with Pantheon as a character completely devoid of identity beyond, oh, he's the Spartan one, he's the 300 reference, my thinking was, okay, that's an opportunity to go in a completely random, crazy, like, to just completely fuck this up and change massive parts of who Pantheon is and what he was. And Riot didn't decide to go in this direction, partly because, of course, they wanted to do an update rework, like a progression rework, where they pull his story forward, where they do some storytelling, which I always approve of. I think that's actually vastly preferable to just rebooting characters in a lot of cases. But yeah, to me it was surprising just how little they decided to change. In fact, they sort of decided to, rather than, like, I say he's in higher resolution now, but the interesting thing is, rather than make him more complex and more complicated, rather than add a whole bunch of detail to the character, they've sort of just kept the level pretty much the same, honestly. Like, outside of the higher resolution and fidelity, new Pantheon, there really isn't that much new on him or about him, except for the iconography, the references that are being made here. Like I said, old Pantheon is just nothing but references to ancient Greece and imagery that's associated with that, and the film 300, which I will return to 1,000,000 times, because God knows Pantheon does. New Pantheon, on the other hand, takes all of those 300 references and all of that stuff with ancient Greek mythology and yada yada yada, and switches it out for references to the internal League of Legends mythology. It becomes references instead to Targon and to the history of Targon and the iconography and the visuals of Targon. That comes across really well in his splash art. Now, a good while ago, I did a video called The Aesthetics of Mount Targon, where I specifically dove into some of the concept art that's around Targon, some of the character design tropes that are sort of associated with them, and the iconography and the visual identity that Targon has in the modern League of Legends game. And one of the things I note is that Targon itself, the mountain, is dominated by these shapes right here. These curved, curling, circular shapes are all over Targon. They're in the Lunari iconography, which is the moon worshippers, which Diana is one of those. It's in the Solari imagery especially, and it's something that's come to flow into almost all serious Targonian imagery over time. And this was one of my big disappointments with the Kayle rework, is that she did not adopt any of the Targonian aesthetics to sort of symbolize that she's sort of proto-Demacian, but she's also associated with Targon. She really didn't do that. But Pantheon, on the other hand, has dipped himself completely in the savory Szechuan sauce of Targon aesthetics, Targon visuals. And one of the major things to look out for, like I said, is the circle imagery. You can see it here in subtle ways, like these little things that are hanging from his loincloth, these rings that are circular. You can see it, like the ring and the protrusions on his spear that kind of mirror image a little bit Leona's imagery, where she's got those circles with extensions out from them, which are celestial imagery. Like, this is a sun or a star, and that is its radiance. That's certainly how Leona handles that particular imagery. The same thing goes for his shield. You can see that they've retained the basic circle shape of his old shield, but they've added these little celestial protrusions and added this extra circle on the front, and you can see the circular clasp of his cloak and the circle on the side of his helmet, which is something that Leona has also got on her armor. And that's like, so they've dipped him really, really deeply into just same basic character design idea, which is well-muscled spearman, basic Age of Empires spearman unit, but this time he looks like he comes from our video game. And that, it has a couple of interesting things. Like, on its own, it really doesn't add much identity to him. If not for the big flaming helmet, big flaming plume coming out of his helmet, and his magical transparent star cloak, which I think we can get a better look at if we look back at the skin spotlights footage. Yeah, there we go. And I don't know if that's a bug with his dance or if they haven't finished animating it yet. But the aspects the aspects of this particular aspect, who's not an aspect anymore, we'll dive into that once we get to the lore, that make him stand out from just being a completely ordinary dude is, well, all the glowy, semi-translucent, transparent star imagery and magic glowy effects that are sort of following him around. And that has a point, because one of the major themes that New Pantheon tackles is this idea of having been an aspect, a celestial aspect, one of the star warriors, yada yada, whatever that thing is, having been one of those, but then having realized that that power is empty, or that it doesn't appeal to him, and that he would much rather be a mortal, a human person. And that comes across really well in his character design, in the sense that there is this tension between, well, he just looks like some dude with like a spear and a shield, and then those little bits of evidence of his sort of supernatural origins, as it were, like that aspect of his history, especially exemplified in the helmet. And that's one of the interesting design decisions that exist here with Pantheon, is that most of him is so relatively simple, right? Like, the shield has like a little bit elaborate, and the spear has those floaty bits going on with it, but most of his character design is just so basic. Like, he's got a cloak, he's got a loincloth, he's got like some boots, and then he's got a giant muscle chest, and like, he just looks like a regular dude. Except for that helmet. Like, that helmet looks like something special, something magical. Unlike, again, old Pantheon's helmet, which was just this basic-ass Roman, Greco-Roman, ancient, anachronistic thing that didn't really make any sense. This time here, you can see this plume of flame that follows him around, which is interesting on a couple of levels, because the idea of setting his head on fire is, first of all, a fatal thing that you shouldn't try at home, but also it communicates this concept of the fire of an idea, like that he's got a fire in his head, in his mind. He's got something going on mentally that manifests itself in this, you know, this flame. And it also gives this idea of him carrying a torch, as it were, like being a torchbearer for humanity, which, when we're dealing with someone who's still carrying around a lot of that Greco-Roman influence, I can't help but think of Prometheus, like, who stole fire from the gods in order to give that power to mankind, which again is the kind of thing that comes through when Pantheon's whole new thematic deal is that he's a god who decided that it was more valuable to him, more true, more authentic to be a mortal and fight as a mortal, which again, we'll get into that in the What's the Deal video. But that was the kind of the interesting thing to me, is that they made a pretty conscious decision to keep most of Pantheon pretty damn simple, pretty damn basic, and then just do this this super elaborate helmet thing with the fiery plume to kind of indicate that there's more to the dude than meets the eye. Those are some really interesting tensions, and they create like the sense of a character underneath it all, that this couldn't just be any dude. Something's going on here, like, because he's fully armored on his head, he's wearing a fully enclosing helmet that seems to do a pretty damn good job of protecting his head, but then he's got this giant, like, he's got nothing on his torso, he's got nothing on his legs, and he's got a giant scar across his chest indicating that he's clearly vulnerable. What's going on there? This is someone who has knowingly and intentionally sacrificed his protection. He has sacrificed his power, as it were, his immortality, as it were, which is being communicated really effectively by the character designs. Like, there's a lot of good, just basic character design discipline stuff going on, where if you understand a little bit about the character, you can really read who he is on his character design and on his body, which gives him individuality. Like, he looks like something that belongs in League of Legends, but he also looks like his own character. He doesn't look like a set of pop culture references to something else. He looks like a reference to himself. He looks like a reference to his own universe, to his own history. And that's much more in line with modern League of Legends, and it's also just much more pleasant and coherent to look at, for my money. A final decision that's been made is to, well, change the gaze with which Pantheon is seen. So this is a subject that's hella contentious, and I'm really tired of having to explain it and debate it over and over again. But when it comes to sexualization in League of Legends, I think it's fair to say there's more like sexy hourglass-shaped titty babes who's got like cleavage and nice asses in the game than there are dudes who are equivalently sexualized for the female or gay male gaze. And a lot of people object to that because they go, oh, Braum, he's got a bare chest, so that's the same. And it's not really, because muscles and bulging power and imperviousness, these are power fantasies. These are not sexual fantasies. There could be an overlap between the two. Anyway, I've just ruined my entire comment section, but the reason I bring it up is because new Pantheon, well, let's just say there's been some enthusiasm for him in the LGBT male circles of League of Legends fandom. And indeed, like, a lot of women have been quite pleased with the particular form that the aspect of war has all of a sudden taken. And I can understand why, because here, unlike old Pantheon, and unlike characters like Braum, even, who are also, like, you know, bare-chested and muscled, there's a different physicality to this version of Pantheon. And this is, like, we're looking at a fairly high-resolution render of his character model. He's not going to look quite like that in-game, as indeed you can tell. If we go back to the skin spotlights footage again, let's see if we can't find the bit I'm looking for. It's right at the start. Right. There's a slightly different physicality to him in-game, but there's also much more of an emphasis and an effort to emphasize him as a plausible human figure, which is something that we don't always see with League of Legends characters. Like, a lot of League of Legends characters are intentionally quite distorted in their proportions and in their construction. Think of someone like Garen, for example, with his giant, ridiculous shoulder pads and stuff like that. He's an exaggerated, stylized character who really isn't supposed to look like anything like a physical presence. And then contrast that with someone like Evelyn, who's very much designed to have these appealing shapes, who's still stylized, but who's also much more supposed to look like something that you could actually, you know, reach out and touch. And the same thing goes for the new Pantheon. This is much more something like, oh yeah, that's it's not that it's realistic. Like, the trouble with talking about this stuff is the language isn't always kind of suited for the task. He's not more realistic, but he's more grounded. He's not realistic, but he's more real, if you understand my meaning, right? Whereas old Pantheon here, between his ridiculous outfit and his armor and the whole weird glowy eyes inside the helmet thing, looks like a cartoon character of a Spartan from 300. This guy looks like a man, a person, a human being who put some clothes on, picked up a shield and a spear, and put a helmet on his head, right? He doesn't look like he's in a costume. He looks like he's wearing his clothes. And that sense of closeness, at least in my estimation, is something that's kind of important when it comes to discussions around sexualization, is that you kind of have to gauge what the character design is trying to communicate to you in terms of the physicality of the character. Is this thing supposed to be present and physical in your perception when you look at him, or them, as the case may be, or are they supposed to be a little bit more remote and unreal? And Pantheon's physicality and his physique and the way that his texturization is done, and, you know, the hairy chest and the very visible nipples, is very much supposed to be a real physical presence, which again ties into this idea that, no, he's supposed to be a flesh and blood, normal human, mortal person, someone who's not immortal, who can't just, you know, wander into battle and wield the power of a god, who has to fight for it, right? But that has the beneficial, depending on how you look at it, side effect of also making him incredibly attractive to certain people and their particular preferences. Specifically, a lot of gay men have expressed a lot of interest in Pantheon. I've seen a lot of straight women be very pleased with, you know, the hairy chest and, like, that little... the way that this bit here sort of insinuates the shape of his hip bones going down, which is something that a lot of women find quite attractive, or at least so I'm told. And that, to me, is interesting. Like, there's a more physical presence to him, which also gives him more of a sexuality. Like, it feels more like he's a presence than a lot of other League of Legends characters, certainly more than old Pantheon, who always feels like a 300 cosplayer. Anyway, I think that's about all I had to say for the comparison between the two. Like, obviously, new Pantheon is a lot better. I think I got that across. at some point over the course of this video, new Pantheon is a hell of a lot better. He's much more complete. He fits into the universe a lot better. He doesn't make stupid references to things that he's not a part of. And he seems to have a personality of his own, and something that drives him, and a history that lies behind him, unlike old Pantheon, who doesn't have anything because he's one of the worst characters in League of Legends. So, if you've enjoyed this video and me talking very fast and rambling about sexualization there near the end, well, you can hit the like button, the comment button, the subscribe button, and all of the other buttons that YouTube wants you to hit so that you get subscribed to the channel and see the videos. And I get to keep making them, which would be nice. I quite enjoy doing this stuff. If you want to support the channel more directly, as you can see on screen, there is a Patreon that you can go hit me up with $1 a month if you want to, and that can be very, very helpful. And if you don't want to sign up for a monthly subscription thing, then there's also tip jars down in the description that you can hit up and, you know, give me a one-time tip to say, hey, you went off on a weird tangent at the end of your Pantheon video there. You can have $3 for that for some reason because I'm a crazy person who gives money to strangers on the internet. You can do that. That's an option that I've made available to you. And as I say at the end of my videos, online content creators like me, for us, like $1 can be the same as thousands of views, especially if we're ad supported on a page that's like on a web page or something. It can literally be the same as thousands and thousands of views. So even though giving $1 to a content creator feels like it's not very much, it actually matters a hell of a lot more than you think. So whether it's me or someone else, if there are online content creators whose work you enjoy, please consider supporting them, because we don't want to have to chase the algorithm. We don't want to be relying on ads. We want to just be making stuff and making a living doing it. So any content creator who you like, please support their work when and if you can. If you haven't enjoyed this video, well, you can hit the dislike button down below this video, and that will tell YouTube that in no uncertain terms, not only do you not like my video, you want me personally dead. YouTube will take all of these dislikes into account when they dispatch their monthly assassination squads to murder YouTubers who don't perform up to standards. Now, you'll never, of course, realize that we've been murdered because we will be instantly replaced with a, passing facsimile generated by Google that uses our past search history and our past posting history to create the image that the person is still there posting on the internet, but in fact we will all be lying dead in the bottom of YouTube's Google Research Laboratories, where our bodies will be ground into a paste that they will then feed to the new clone babies that they're making from the DNA of the most successful YouTubers on the platform at any one time, as part of their machine learning algorithm to produce the perfect YouTuber who will get infinite watch time, usher in the singularity, and confine us all to the Matrix. Thank you very much for watching.